Welcome to day 48 of our daily Bible reading. We are starting a new book this week, or today, Numbers chapters 1 to 2 and Acts 24. So, the first question I always get is, what are people counting when we are reading the book of Numbers? So, there are a couple different names for this book in the Bible. The word Numbers comes from a Greek translation, which is looking at the fact that a census is taken in the first couple chapters of Numbers. And so those are the numbers that they're talking to. Moses is counting all the people of the tribes of Israel and figuring out how many people there are, especially how many people who are able to fight, and organize them into military divisions and organize them by tribe, or the tribes are connected to the sons of Jacob. But the Hebrew name for this book refers to the wilderness of Sinai and doesn't talk about numbers at all. There's a tradition that the names of the books of the first 5 books come from one of the first words used in the book. And so the 5th word talks about the wilderness of Sinai. And so this name is emphasizing more the fact that the book of Numbers is talking about the time that the Israelites are living in the wilderness of Sinai. And there's 3 main sections to that. The time that they are around Mount Sinai, getting instruction from God, the time that they are wandering in the wilderness, moving towards the promised land of Canaan, and then the time that they are camped in Moab as they are preparing to enter into the land of Canaan. These first 2 chapters, as I said, are a census. They are counting the people, and they are organizing them by clans or tribes. And this all goes to the 12 sons of Jacob. Now, when we get to the end of it, you realize there's going to be 13 groups. So Jacob had 12 sons. One of them got sent off to Egypt, Joseph. He had 2 sons while he was in Egypt. But one of the other sons did some stuff, things got complicated, and his group, his tribe, have become the priests who are in charge of taking care of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. And so they don't get counted the same way. So there are 12 tribes, the 11 sons of Jacob plus the 2 sons of Joseph, and then the tribe of Levites. Levi was another son of Jacob, but they don't get land, they don't fight, they are in charge of the ritual life, the spiritual life of the community of Israel. Now, as we go through Numbers, it's going to feel like it's a little bit disjointed. There's a number of types of literature in here. This is a collection of texts. Some of it's going to be historical, some will be ritual, some will be legal. There are some poems, there are some folk traditions. So if it feels like some of the sentences and everything kind of go in different directions, that's because they do. But as we read this, we need to look with an eye to the Jewish tradition that while this is a collection of texts gathered together, it is collected together into a whole. And together, they all have a story of the people of Israel living together with God during their time in the wilderness. And so we need to read the whole section through the lens of the whole, acknowledging that we're reading through different texts that have been put together and edited together, but it's the whole and the strength of the whole that brings power to the story and the narrative of Numbers, and we should not get caught up in breaking it down into separate sections. They end up spending 40 years wandering. This may not be a literal 40 years, but perhaps more of a poetic 40 years, meaning a time of completion. And all of this will finish with them preparing to enter the promised land. As we turn to the book of Acts today, we see that the Jewish leaders who are wanting to murder Paul are now preparing for Paul's trial before the Roman governor, and they are making their case to the governor, and then Paul gets a chance to mount his defense. And of course, he is well educated, well trained, and mounts a quite compelling defense. But we discover that Governor Felix delays. He's trying to work out the politics of the situation. He spends some time with his wife Drusilla listening to Paul's teaching on the way of Jesus. And you think, hey, maybe there's some hope that Felix is going to become a believer. But then it ends with realizing that Felix holds Paul in prison for 2 years. and continually meets with Paul, but he's really out to get a bribe from Paul. He's not out to grow in his own spiritual understanding of God. So 2 years is a long time, and I really started thinking about that 2-year period. And the reflection I had on this section today is, what is it that we wait around on? In Numbers, we're going to be starting a story of the Israelites waiting for 40 years to get into the Promised Land. And here's Paul waiting for 2 years to have his case heard and decided before a Roman official. What are we waiting for? Are we waiting with anticipation for the return of Jesus, or do we lack a sense of urgency? This is, it's been 2,000 years. How could this happen in my lifetime? I'm going to go do what I want to do, and, maybe I'll get around to stuff. Are we feeling an urgency to be preparing ourselves for Jesus' return? Is there something that God has been calling us to do that we've been putting off? Are we waiting for something? Are we being held back? What is it that's happening in our lives? And are we in a time of waiting for something like Paul or like the Israelites? And what can we learn from their experience to help us grow with God and make something meaningful happen out of our time of waiting? Hope this has been helpful, and I will see you next time.